Hello fashion lovers and prospective fashion designers, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am Daniel Priska. On this channel, you will find helpful videos on sewing techniques, pattern drafting, and everything fashion related, from the basics to the professional tips and tricks, all in a fun and easy way. In my previous video, I showed you how to take accurate body measurements for a perfect fit. Today, we are diving into one of the most important foundations in garment making, basic bodice pattern drafting. If you've ever wanted to create perfectly fitted tops, blouses, jackets, or dresses, learning to draft a basic bodice is the first step. In this video, I will walk you through the meaning of a basic bodice, the tools you need, the required measurements, and the step-by-step process to draft both the front and the back bodice. Now, grab your pattern paper, ruler, tape measure, and let's get started. So before we start drafting, let's quickly understand what a basic bodice is all about. A basic bodice block is a foundational pattern that represents the upper part of the body, including the bust, waist, neckline, and shoulder, without any design elements. It serves as a starting point to create well-fitted upper body garments like tops, blouses, jackets, or dresses. In this video, we are drafting a half-scale basic bodice block, which is a smaller simplified version of a regular bodice pattern, where some of the key measurements are reduced to half their original sizes. So to draft a basic bodice block, whether a half-scale or a full-scale, you will need a few essential tools like a tape measure for taking accurate body measurements, a pattern paper where you will do the actual drafting, a pattern master for shaping necklines and armholes smoothly, a pencil for drawing lines, an eraser to remove any mistake, and a scissors to cut out your drafted pattern. So with all our tools ready, the next important step is knowing the body measurement required to draft a basic bodice block. I will be using my own measurements for this tutorial, and both the measurements and their corresponding values are on the screen. Also, since we are drafting a half-scale basic bodice block, I have included the scale measurement as well, so you can follow along easily. Now that we have our measurements in place, let's go on to the actual drafting. So the first step to drafting this half-scale basic bodice block is to determine the dimensions of the drafting area. That is the amount of space you will need on the paper, both in width and height, to draft your pattern. So we usually use half of the largest horizontal body measurement, which is the bust circumference, for the width, and the shoulder to waist measurement for the height. My bust circumference is 36 inches and half of that is 18 inches. I'll be adding 2 inches each, which gives me a total of 20 inches as the width of my drafting area. So I'll be marking that 20 inches horizontally on my pattern paper. Similarly, my shoulder to waist measurement is 17 inches, which I will mark vertically on my paper to represent the height of the drafting area. I'm going to be doing that right now. So now we've created our drafting area, whose dimension is 20 inches by 17 inches. So on the horizontal axis, I have 20 inches, while on the vertical axis, I have 17 inches. The next thing I'm going to do now is to divide this rectangle into 2 equal parts, so that I'll be able to draft both the front and the back panel on this same space. To do that, I will divide the width of this rectangle, which is 20 inches, by 2. So 20 inches by 2 is essentially 10 inches. So I'll place my tape measure and locate the midpoint of 20 inches. So I'll mark it along this rectangle. So after dividing the width by 2, I will create the line which will represent the midpoint, just like this. So now I'm done sharing this rectangle into 2 equal parts. The parts on my left hand side will be for my back panel, and I'll label it as BP, while this part on my right hand side will be used to draft the front panel, which I will label as FP. So this line will be my center back line, which is CBL, while this other line will be my center front line, which is CFL. I'll proceed to marking the horizontal line, starting with the shoulder line at the top of our rectangle. So this line is our shoulder line, and I'm going to be labeling it as SL. So shoulder line for both the front and the back panel will be labeled as SL. Our chest line, bust line, and waist line will also be drawn across both panels. All the horizontal lines drawn and labeled on the pattern paper. For the back panel, I've marked the chest line at 8.5 inches and the waistline at 15 inches. On the front panel, I've also marked the chest line at 8.5 inches, bust line at 9.5 inches, and waistline at 17 inches. So the next step is to impute our measurements, starting with the shoulder width. So guys, this is my shoulder line, which I've already labeled as SL. And it is at this line that I will be imputing half of my shoulder width measurement across. So half of my shoulder width measurement is 7.5 inches. So for the front panel, I'm going to mark half of my shoulder width measurement, which is 7.5 inches. So this is 7.5 inches, and I'll call it as A1. I will also do the same thing for the back panel, starting from the center back line, just like this. So this is 7.5 inches, and I will also call it A1. The next thing I'm going to be creating is the neckline. For the front panel, I'll be creating a neckline using the standard measurement of 3 inches by 3 inches. So I'll be marking 3 inches as the width of the neckline. So this is 3 inches, and I will label it as B2. So for the depth, I will also mark 3 inches, which I will label as C3. Now, for the back panel as well, I will be marking 3 inches for the width of the neckline, and I will label it as B2, just the same way I labeled the front panel. Now for the depth, it will be 1 inch, and it will be C3. The next important thing I'm going to be doing is to create the neckline. So for the front panel, I will connect point B2 and C3 together using my curved ruler to create the neckline. So I'm done doing that, and I'm also going to connect point B2 and C3 for the back panel to create the neckline as well. So I'm just connecting the various points together to create our shoulder slope, because our shoulders are not straight. For the front panel, I'm going to place my tape measure on A1, and I will measure 1.5 inches downwards. So this is 1.5 inches from A1, and I will label that point as D4. For the back panel, I will do the same thing by placing my tape measure on point A1, then I will measure 1 inch down. That will be the shoulder slope for the back panel. That point will also be called D4. For the back panel, I'm connecting point B2 and D4 together, just like this. While for the front panel, I'm connecting point B2 and D4 as well. Okay, to create the armhole depth, I will mark 7.5 inches of shoulder width on the chest line. The essence of doing that is for us to get an accurate armhole line. So this is 7.5 inches. At that point where I mark 7.5 inches, I'm going to be labeling it as E5 for the back panel. I'll do the same thing for the front panel as well by marking 7.5, and I will label it as E5. Next, I'm going to be connecting from E5 to D4 for both the back and the front panel, and that will serve as our armhole depth. For the back panel, I have 7.5 inches as the armhole depth, so half of it will be 3 3/4, which is 3.75. So this is 3.75 on my tape measure, and at that point where I mark 3.75, I'm going to label it as F6. From point F6, I will measure half inch inwards. I will call it as G7. For the front panel, I have a total of 7 inches, so half of it will be 3.5, and that point will also be called F6. So at point F6, I will go in by 0.75 of an inch for armhole curve. So at that point, I'm going to be labeling it as G7 as well. In addition to the 7.5 inches that we marked on our chest line, I'm also going to be marking quarter of my bust circumference on both panel on the chest line like this. So quarter of my bust circumference is 9 inches. So I will mark 9 inches and I will call it as H8. I'm also doing the same thing for the front panel by marking quarter of my bust circumference, which is 9 inches, and I'll label it as H8. To create the armhole curve properly for both panel, I'll be connecting point D4, G7 and H8 together with my pattern master. For that placement, I will mark half of my bust panel measurement, which is 4 inches, on the waistline upwards. For the back panel, I'll be marking it up to 5 inches from the waistline. So I'm marking 4 inches for half of the bust panel measurement, and I'll mark it up to 5 inches from the waistline. So that is it. So I've marked it up to 5 inches on the waistline, and I will connect the various points together like this. I'll do the same thing for the front panel by also marking half of my bust panel measurement, which is 4 inches, and I'll mark it up to 1 inch before I will reach my bust point line. So after that, I'm going to be connecting the points together just like this. So I'll be marking half inch on both sides to create the dart legs. This half inch, half inch. So for the back panel, I will connect to meet with this point like this. Again, for the front panel, I will also do the same thing by joining the dart legs to that point where I marked. Now on the waistline, I'm going to mark quarter of my waist circumference plus that 1 inch that I took for that intake. So quarter of my waist circumference is 8 inches plus that 1 inch that intake, it will be 9 inches. And at this point where I mark 9 inches, I'm going to label it as I9. I'll do the same thing for the front panel by marking 9 inches. Then I'll label it as I9. So to shape the side seam for both panels, I'll connect points H8 and I9 together. Our half-scale basic bodice block is more than 90% ready. So the next thing I'm going to be doing now is to take away zip bulge from the back panel. So to do that, I'm going to mark half inch inwards on the chest line. So at this point where I mark half inch, I'll be connecting it to meet with the neckline, or you can also stop a few inches before the neckline, and after that I will also join it to the waistline. So essentially I'm connecting the point from this chest line to the neckline like this, and I'm taking it downwards to meet with the waistline. So this half inch that I used to remove zip bulge will be replaced on the chest line like this, and I will connect it back to I9. To ensure that both the front and the back panel align properly at the waist, I'm going to be using that 2 inches difference between the shoulder to waist measurements for the front panel and the back length to create a bust dart. So to do that, I'm going to measure 1 inch away from the bust line, and I will call it as J10. So from point J10, I will measure that 2 inch difference, and I will call it K11. So between J10 and K11, I will get the midpoint where I will label as L12. Okay, remember that while we were drawing the waistline dart, we did not stop directly on the bust point. To create the bust dart properly, we are going to be connecting point K11 and J10 to point towards the bust point. So finally, our half-scale basic bodice block is ready. Now I'll proceed into cutting it out. You could see that both the back and the front panel are equal on the side seam and even on the length. What I will do is to hold one part of the dart leg, then move it to touch the other side, just like this. So after that, you will see that the side seam does no longer align. So just step it down so that we'll be able to make this adjustment. After folding in the bust dart, this is how your half-scale basic bodice block should look like. We've come to the end of today's class on drafting a half-scale basic bodice block. I hope you found it helpful. Ensure you like, share and subscribe for more sewing and pattern making videos. Feel free to ask your questions and drop your comment in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.